So the coins from Qumran. The impetus for the topic I'm speaking on today is the recent publication. Is the recent publication of the coins from Khirbet Qumran excavated during the digs at the site led by Roland de Vaux from 1951 to 1956. The volume also covers the coins from the nearby farmstead of Ein Feshka, which will not be part of my discussion today. After some preliminary matters to cover, I will begin with the coins lost on the site in a variety of places, which the editor refers to as single finds, before turning to the famous silver hoard that is perhaps more familiar to some of you. The editor of the volume, sorry, seems to move if I do that. Okay. The editor of the volume, Bruno Gallagher, of the University of Trieste, served as an advisor to the numismatic collection of the Studium Biblicum Franciscanum, SBF, in Jerusalem. More or less upon arriving in the vault of the SBF for the first time, Gallagher was able to put his hands on a batch of coins from Khirbet Qumran that had been deemed lost since the late Augustus Speicherman had worked with the coins, likely from 1958 until his early death in 1973 at the age of 53. Try this. Right, wrong direction. Speicherman was the curator of the SBF Museum, and his contribution to the study of the coins from Khirbet Qumran is generously integrated and forms a significant part of this volume. Which includes images of a selection of Speicherman's index cards, as well as the entirety of his handwritten registers of Qumran coins, which actually include a register of the single finds and the hoard, the silver hoard. While Gallagher's edition is devoted to the coins uncovered during the excavations led by de Vaux in the 1950s, his analysis also makes reference to publications of more recently excavated coins from Khirbet Qumran during the 9 seasons of excavations led by Yitzhak Magen and Yuval Pelek. And the numismatic report in that volume is by Donald Ariel, the curator of numismatics at the Israel Antiquities Authority. More recently still, Yoav Fahy and Randall Price have published in the journal Dead Sea Discoveries 9 coins excavated on the Qumran Plateau between 2004 and 2008. As is customary, Gallagher divides the numismatic evidence from Qumran into 2 types of coin finds, which he terms single finds of coins and coin hoards. I use hoards in the plural since there is some equivocation in Gallagher's use of terminology. This slide gives you an overview of a table that Gallagher has produced as he introduces chapter 6, the single finds from Khirbet Qumran and Ein Feshka. The table that I have centered here is attributed to the Qumran finds only. And it starts off with the single finds, and he points out that we have 707 single find coins, which he divides into 649 single finds from the Seleucid period to the Byzantine period, and 3 hoards of various sizes which you can see at the bottom of his table, which add up to 58 coins. The single finds proper have peaks in the Hasmonean period, with especially 125 bronze prutode for Alexander Jannaeus. Prutode were low-value coins that I gather were revived as a currency in the state of Israel as well until they were withdrawn in 1960. Sorry, I want to stay with this for a second longer. It is rather inconsistent in my view to include 3 hoards in a compilation of single finds, as we see in this table. For Qumran, this includes, and I'm going down the list of the hoards, 8 bronze prutode of Alexander Jannaeus, the first hoard in the table, and this hoard is referred to in the discussion later on of single finds as a micro hoard. And then the second item is the numerically largest hoard mentioned in this table, which comprises 41 coins from the First Jewish War, is referred to as a small hoard later on in the discussion, which is now dispersed, and again in the discussion of single finds. And finally, still in the table, the final item is disregarding in red imperial denarii. That's my addition. I will explain that in a second. The final item he lists is Bar Kokhba revolt, 9 coins. So this is within the chapter of the single finds. We come across a heading, hoarding at Kirbet Qumran and Ain Feshka. The micro hoard and the small hoard, which is actually rather large, 41 coins, they are not covered in that section on hoarding, which is part of a chapter on single finds. Instead, the discussion on hoarding refers to a mixed hoard of 4 silver denarii, which range from 73 to 111 CE, and 9 Bar Kokhba bronzes. So I think what's happened in the table is that we have the 9 Bar Kokhba bronzes mentioned, but the second part of the mixed hoard, the 4 denarii, are not included in our table. So I'm wondering whether those 4 denarii are counted in the single finds category, dated 70 to 130 CE above. But it took me quite a while to get to the bottom of all of this. And it is difficult to define lost coins and precisely, but there are definitions by Metcalfe of a hoard being anything that is more than 1 coin. And it is rather unfortunate to use the terminology single finds, which is very particular, and then include a number of hoards. The earliest coins among the single finds from Qumran date to the 3rd to early 2nd century BCE, starting with the Seleucid bronze of Antiochus III, minted in Antioch. It is crucial that we emphasize that any coin finds, including the earliest Seleucid coinage from Qumran, offer nothing more than a terminus post quem for the loss or concealment of the coins. And it is possible that the Seleucid coinage was circulating at a much later time. I think it is fair to observe that the time period post quem for the early Seleucid coins is within the range of the dating window for the earliest manuscripts brought to Qumran, which is also the 3rd to 2nd centuries BCE. For instance, 4Q, Exodus, Leviticus, Paleo-Deuteronomy, Samuel B, Jeremiah, and Astronomical Enoch. It is, however, the 2 centuries that mark the turn of the era, and now I do want to move here, the those 2 centuries that mark the turn of the era when most of the coins circulated. Strikingly, the most vibrant period of scribal activity behind the scrolls recovered from the vicinity of Qumran also falls into the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE window, which corresponds, I think, significantly to the most vibrant economic exchange of coins by those who frequented the site. Here we are on firmer ground, with the terminus post quem from the bulk of the single finds in significant numbers from this period falls within the time of the height of scribal activity attested at the site. I've given you some of the big hitters in terms of the coins that we have, and Alexander Janaeus stands out still with his 125 coins. And I just want to show you some of those as well, some of those riches from Alexander's coins. Whoops, here we go. Here we go. If we look at Qumran, if we look also further at how Qumran fares in comparison to other sites in the region, Calicut does offer a number of very helpful comparanda, with single finds from other sites in the region. In particular, he shares figures of annual average coin loss, AACL, at Qumran, alongside Masada, Ein Feshka, Jericho, and En-Gedi. Gallagher himself acknowledges that the data needs to be treated with caution, especially for smaller sites like Ein Feshka and En-Gedi. The statistical data, as far as I can make out, takes into account a diachronic distribution of coins based on the time frame supplied by the minting and issuing authority. Let me pick out the line, and I'm going to show you that slide here. Let me pick out the line on the coins of Alexander Janaeus from Gallagher's Table 5 on annual average coin loss across a number of locations. For Qumran, in my table, I'm offering a single total figure from the excavations of DeVoe, Ariel, and Fahy Price, which Gallagher lists separately. These figures suggest, well, first of all, I should say that as Gallagher already acknowledges, and as Dennis Mitzi has pointed out at the SBL meeting in Boston, Dennis Mitzi, archaeologist from the University of Malta, who is writing a review of Gallagher's volume for Revue de Qumran, which will be very helpful. He's already pointed out for these smaller sites like En-Gedi and Ein Feshka, this is not very reliable. These data are not very reliable. And plus, these figures suggest, however, that economically favorable conditions for the inhabitants of the site of Qumran, likely with resources and exchanges from beyond Qumran, having reached the site also. While it has been pointed out that the coins of Alexander Janaeus remained in circulation until the outbreak of the First Revolt, this extended period still maps on well with the peak of scribal activity at the site. The movement behind the scrolls was apparently able to thrive during an extremely perilous period. Moreover, a benevolent prayer for King Jonathan includes a petition to the Holy One to guard King Jonathan Hamelech, and for his name to be blessed. John Collins and Sidney White Crawford have compellingly suggested that the period during the rule of Alexander Janaeus was beneficial to the inhabitants of the site of Qumran. White Crawford goes so far as to suggest that the resettlement at the site may have been facilitated by Alexander Linnaeus. What is clear is that the single fine coins from Qumran, at the point at which the Hasmonean state had reached its largest scale, are out of kilter with the notions that the inhabitants of Qumran represent an enterprise of a disengaged and inward-looking scribal community. Oops. So this is not what I was hoping for. So I will leave it. I will leave this for here now. I will leave this here now. It is significant to my mind, furthermore, that a large number of single finds were recovered from peripheral areas of the site. So Locus 13, for instance, workshops and storage area, including 3 cylindrical jars, revealed 13 coins. Locus 22, a storage area with silo, a jar, and a depression for a jar, revealed 11 coins. Locus 111, part of the outbuilding to the east of the main building, Roland Devaux called it Dépendance du bâtiment principal. He describes a courtyard subsequently turned into a room containing a cupboard as well as jars which exposed 10 coins. Finally, 71 coins emerged from the northern enclosure, which is referred to as an industrial area by Roland Devaux and by Jody Magnus in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, edited by former president Professor John Barton, and where she has an article on the archaeology of Qumran. So an industrial area, the type of industry in the northern enclosure is debated. Perhaps date honey production is most likely, something that Dennis Mitzi has written on in recent years. Other proposed contenders include textile production, fish farming, and tannery, although no tannin traces or animal hairs have been found, as Jody points out. To my mind, this picture of the location of the find sites gives further weight to the conclusion offered by Gallagher on the site. And I quote Gallagher, "Monetary exchange at Khirbet Qumran was intense and prolonged, a condition typical of a place where exchanges were conducted among trade partners with monetary instruments. We should not imagine daily exchanges, but rather periods in the course of which purchases took place with a transfer of goods/products against money." End of quote. In short, the single find coins from Qumran offer compelling evidence that the site and its inhabitants were deeply embedded in a wide range of socio-economic interactions. Let me now turn to the Silver Hoard. Oops. I'm struggling a bit with 2 screens, all of you far away, me reading my script. So thank you for your patience as we move through it. Seems to be more or less working. So the Qumran hoard the Silver Hoard, that is, consists of Tyrian tetradrachmas and didrachmas, alongside 6 Roman silver denarii. Henry Seyrick pictured a distinguished French numismatist who had previously worked with Joseph Milik on the hoard discovered at Wadi Murabaat in 1952, was both the creator and first director of the Institute of Archaeology of Beirut under the French mandate, and was also part of the Free France resistance government in New York during the Second World War. Now, Sayrick identified the contents of the 3 vessels in which the silver hoard from Qumran was found in 3 parts, labeled A, B, and C. The 3 lots contained, respectively, 222, 186, and 153 coins. Even though Sayrick's inventory, now this is something very striking, even though Sayrick's inventory was shared with DeVoe in 1955, it was never published prior to Gallagher's edition in 2024. This delay was to the detriment of the fields of numismatics and Qumran studies, especially since Sayrick drew attention to a number of previously unattested Turian coins from Qumran. Now, I always think Father DeVoe was an incredibly busy man. He didn't just write on Qumran and Doug, etc. And perhaps he had plans of checking Sayrick again. It's very easy for me to say, but it does seem, and Gallagher is, also finds it a pity. So I don't want to not honor what DeVoe has done, but it does seem, looking back, and I'm sure that's not what he was hoping for, a great pity that we've been deprived of this work for this long time. But we can celebrate the fact it's here now. While Augustus Speicherman worked initially, as I mentioned, on the single find coins, he would subsequently create his own inventory of the hoard and label the 3 segments 1, 2, and 3. The coins in the hoard date from 95-94 BCE to 98 BCE, so most of the 1st century BCE, offering a terminus post quem for the deposit at Qumran. In the 1950s, the hoard would be divided, with a large portion being transferred to the Jordanian Archaeological Museum in Amman and 153 remaining in Jerusalem at what was then the Palestine Archaeological Museum, PAM, and is now the Rockefeller Museum in East Jerusalem. Regrettably, the contents of the 3 vessels of hoard coins were at that point jumbled together. Speicherman made a valiant attempt to reconfigure the 3 lots on the basis of his access to 2/3 of the full hoard, made up of holdings in Jerusalem and Amman. In addition, Speicherman consulted Sayrick's earlier inventory of the complete hoard as he worked on it. Mitzi and Magnus have recently challenged the once widespread view that the Qumran hoard was accumulated as a community's own temple tax, or their belongings as they joined. Mitzi and Magnus point out that the date of the most recent silver coins in the hoard at the end of the 1st century BCE as evidence against the hypothesis of a temple tax system in the community, which continued, the community that is, to thrive well into the century after the last coins attested in the silver hoard. Now I want to return back to the pots now, and I've got 3 images, and as you can see, 2 of the pots are rather similar with a very wide opening, and one is a vase with a slightly narrow opening. I have strained my eyes quite hard to look at the 2 pots with a wider opening to determine that they are the 2 pots of that kind that are talked about, or whether they are the same one. And I do think there are some kind of damage points at the top of the rim in similar places, but I think it's like I can see, despite the quality of the picture, maybe the top left image suggests it's a bit more ropey, if I can use that word, that jar. But if anyone else has any insight afterwards, we can discuss that. So we've got the pots. While the sum total, well, we don't have the pots, which will be my point. While the sum total of 561 silver coins, which is a real treasure, have naturally been at the center of attention, I'm very curious about the three vessels in which the hoard was found. Gallagher suggests a hoard that was moved to the site. According to DeVoe, the two wide-mouthed pots, to be distinguished from a vase with a narrow opening, differ from Qumran pot types. And having spoken to Dennis as well about this, he does agree. They don't look like anything else we have from Qumran. Finally, I'm trying to establish where the original pots are now kept. These pots are remarkable artifacts that it would be vital to analyze, both from a point of view of style, but also materially, to shed any light on the story of the silver hoard that we might be able to. And I would love to hear from anyone with information. However, fortunately for us, I have had a call for information before. I put one out in Boston at SBL, and to my delight, and to your delight, I hope, I found out via my colleague, the archaeologist Marcello Fidanzio of the Swiss-Italian University in Lugano, that one of these pots is found in the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and he shared this photo with me. So we know where one of the pots is, at least. And now I'm going to say a little bit about two more topics, coins on tour and coins lost. And I'm hoping to stay within the time. So, coins, on tour. In 1965, 50 coins were exhibited in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and the University of Pennsylvania Museum, and in London. Documentation in the archive of the École Biblique in Jerusalem confirms the Chargé d'Affaires in Amman confirmed the return of all the items loaned for the exhibition by cable in 1966. So these exhibitions happened, and there was a receipt in 1996 that everything got back. The 50 coins reached the Rockefeller Museum in East Jerusalem in 1967, and since the Six-Day War in the same year have been in part of the holdings of the IAA. So this picture I have here, I realize it's not actual coins. It's an image that was used in the exhibition at the British Museum, and I found this still on the British Museum Stills website, which I want to acknowledge. But it's still quite nice to have some image from that period. Moving on to coins lost, which will be my final slide, you'll be glad to know. Here we have two documents. The handwritten work goes back to Michel Picarillo, a Franciscan director of the archive at SBF at a later period. So starting from the beginning of the story, at a later point, a French numismatist, Christian Auguet, identified tampering with the holdings in Amman. A further interlude concerns documentation signed by the Belgian archaeologist Robert Donziel from the Université Louvain de Neuve in Louvain, if you're talking about that institution, Leuven, if you're talking about the Catholic University. So the Belgian archaeologist Robert Donziel, in the letters you see here, the typewritten message is by him checking out a large number of single find coins, one lot of 10 and another of 200. And the type note on the left-hand document refers to the 200. I'm not sure you are able to see it. It's in the second not indented line, the second word. So he confirms having taken these single find coins. And we know these coins are lost since many years later in 2006. Gallagher refers to correspondence between Donziel and Michel Picarillo, director of the archive of the Franciscan SBF, where Picarillo bemoans only 2/7 of the coins documented by Spijkerman were accounted for. So Picarillo's handwriting is at the bottom of these two documents. In the first one on the left, he says, "Les monnaies ne sont jamais rentrées chez nous." He basically says in 92, the coins have not been returned to us yet. And then, curiously, the date is still the one for when he confirmed the coins weren't back. This seems to be crossed out, and Picarillo's signature there saying rentré, in other words, returned. This is very curious because it seems potentially insincere. I don't know what went on, because subsequently he bemoaned that there are still many coins missing. So this is a rather sort of open-ended, curious state of affairs. Gallagher concludes on this episode, of course, despite this archival reconstruction, the question of the disappearance of 210 coins from the single finds of the Roland de Vaux excavations remains unanswered. Doubts remain both regarding the safeguarding of the coins at the SBF and about those who had them in the studio or took part of them. In short, as I mentioned, the coins from Qumran, and particularly the large number of single coins, 707, really shed immensely important fresh light on the economic aspects of the site. They are also extremely important for coinage of that period. They are also important for the New Testament and the early period of coinage in the empire. And I just wanted to also mention something rather curious and interesting. There is an article by Cray called Hoard, Small Change and the Origins of Coinage. And he makes the point that there can be a little bit of bias in the sources because many coins are discovered in hoards, apparently, and hoards tend to have higher currencies within them. And therefore, his point is that we must be careful not to assume that there weren't many lower value coins also circulating, which can very easily disappear, you know. And I just wanted to end by reflecting on that, looking at the evidence I've presented to you, where we have 561 in that large silver hoard, but we have 707 of the mainly lower denomination coins in the single finds. And I imagine that will be, of great interest to us and also, students of coins and antiquity more widely, and tells, really another emphatic note to the evidence that we have with these single coins. Thank you so much.